All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. I'm going to start off with a couple of public service announcements. This is the shelter-in-place announcement being passed on to an individual in our community.
Because of coronavirus, you are going to be quarantined, but you have a choice. Do you A, quarantine with your wife and child, or B?
Very good.
There's somebody who clearly doesn't care as long as they're not stuck at home. This is the Humane Society directives. I didn't check with the CDC since Dr. Bob did a good job with that. The Humane Society quarantine directives are sit, stay, good boy. Okay.
Now I've got
Press on the.
Okay. Let me talk just a little bit about my background. Many of you know me.
You see that, honey?
I was a consulting psychologist for 37 years, working with organizations. So I'm not a therapist. I work with individuals on their own self-development. I work with them on managing others, building teams, that kind of thing. But along the way, probably 15, 20 years ago, I started getting very interested in an emerging field in psychology called positive psychology. So what I've done is grab a few random things out of positive psychology that may be helpful in this time in just getting us to reframe the way we look at the world. I used to be able to say to my clients, I have never given my clients bad advice. I've always charged them. But since I'm giving free advice here, it may be bad. I'll warn you that. Let me tell you a joke. A divorced woman had a young son and married a very tough, no-nonsense guy. The little boy was always cheerful, optimistic, and just drove his new stepfather crazy. So to teach the boy a lesson, to toughen him up and get him used to make him more realistic, he fills a cardboard box with horse poop, wraps it up, and puts it under the Christmas tree with the little boy's name on it. Well, Christmas morning, the boy comes down, pulls the present out, tears it open, opens the box up, looks in there, and whoops for joy and starts digging through the horse poop. And the stepfather says, "What are you doing?" He says, "There's got to be a pony in here somewhere." The lesson here is being happy is not about being in a certain set of circumstances. It's more the attitude you bring to the situation, okay? And a person with a positive attitude can usually find a way to find the best in others. You know, because the truth of it is right now is not something we asked for. We didn't want this, we didn't ask for this, but we got it. And it looks like it's going to last somewhere between 4 and maybe as much as 12 weeks before we can get back to something resembling our old lifestyle. The person that comes to mind in terms of coping with bad circumstances is a guy named Viktor Frankl, who is now passed away, but was a pretty famous psychiatrist. He was a young Jewish doctor in Nazi Germany and was put in the death camps and managed to survive a good part of the war despite all the things going on there. He's written a number of books, has his own form of therapy. But the two quotes here stick with me. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So, we have to turn within and think about what is it we can change about ourselves, our attitude, the way we approach things. The other one is more famous. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And he talked about how this was the thing that seemed to characterize the people who were able to survive the death camps. They never gave up on controlling their own approach and attitude to the circumstances. The Nazis were all about convincing you it was hopeless. They had total control over your life, which they did. But you can always manage your own attitude. And that's what I'm talking about here today. There is a growing body of research on what's called human flourishing. That is, those people who seem to be living the best kinds of life. They're personally happy, fulfilled, satisfied. They're engaging their strengths and talents. They have a network of positive relationships and the people they live with, work with. They have a sense of meaning and purpose in what they're doing. And there's lots of evidence of accomplishments, tangible output from these other factors. You know, positive emotions can be, what I want you to do is, I walk through there, is think about yourself. How are you doing in these 5 areas during this coronavirus quarantine? Positive emotions is, you know, this can be active or passive. You can think of joy and glee and all this kind of thing, or serenity and contentment, all fall under the positive heading. What we know is positive emotions are linked to an ability to broaden and build durable psychological resources, relationships with other people, learn and develop your skills, this kind of thing. So positive emotions are at the core of using the time productively. Engagement, this is the idea of using your greatest strengths at full capacity. Some of this grew out of research on something called flow. That is, any top performer will tell you when they're in the middle of a really first-class performance, they lose track of time, where they are, what they're doing. This can be athletes, this can be musicians, this can be all types of performers. This can be somebody who is writing a book or programming a computer. If they're using their strengths and they're fully engaged, it's a very contentment-building experience for most people. When you're not able to use your strengths, this leads to a sense of frustration. And so right now, if you're cut off and some of your strengths are in the social realm, you need to figure out ways to better exercise those. Get on the phone with people, find other ways to reach out. We're talking about physical distancing truly rather than social distancing. Relationships of a positive nature. This helps buffer us from life's shocks. So again, we've got our loved ones, but also our friends, our family, our extended relationships. All these things contribute to our ability to kind of refresh and re-energize. A sense of meaning and purpose is one that has become increasingly apparent as an important component to human flourishing. We know, for example, that religious people generally are happier, more satisfied, and tend to live longer. And for a long time, we thought the active ingredient was the social network. But increasingly, it looks like it is having a sense of meaning and purpose. Now, not all meaning and purpose has to be linked to religion, but much of it is for people. But it may be linked to a desire to give back, a sense that there are ways we can improve the world. What happens is when we get knocked off course, this tends to allow us to build resilience, to say, just because I can't move towards that goal anymore right now, doesn't mean that goal is not important and I won't be back to that. So that's an important source of resilience. And the last accomplishments kind of flow from the other 4. If you're experiencing a lot of positive emotion, using your strengths on a regular basis, have positive network of relationship, and have a sense of meaning and purpose, you're able to produce valuable stuff that will stay with you for an extended period of time. So again, think about your status in each one of those areas and things you can do about it to raise it. An easy one for positive emotion is do some gratitude exercises. Get on the computer and look up gratitude exercises, and it'll tell you to do things like write down 3 blessings every day, or think of someone you haven't properly thanked for what they've meant to you in your life and write them a gratitude letter telling them what they have meant to you and what they've contributed to your life, and share it with them. What we know is these produce large jumps in a sense of personal happiness and fulfillment that lasts for a month or 2. Another piece of research. This is studying people who seem to be pretty consistently in a state of well-being, the kind of chronically happy, well-off folks. and the 4 keys are resilience is one, that ability to quickly bounce back, return to the baseline when faced with upset. This is not something you change overnight, but it has a profound effect on the quality of life and the ability to manage your emotions. From just a piece of this, for example, is if you talk to people, they'll say, this event happened and then I felt this way. In fact, this event happened, I said this stuff to myself about what happened, and then I felt this way. And often the way we feel has more to do with those beliefs, the things we say to ourselves, the way we frame things. The ability to shift that and have that dialogue in your mind can do a lot to change the intensity of the emotional reaction to things. Positive outlook, there's a pony in here somewhere, but seeing the good in people and circumstances. And again, there are at least a couple of ways this works. Trusting people is associated with building better relationships and more satisfying relationships with others. But it's also optimism. And there is a book called Learned Optimism. If you're a natural pessimist, you might want to look at one of those. We know that pessimism is good in some professions. If you're going to be an auditor or an airline pilot or a lawyer, being a pessimist is usually to your advantage. But for many other roles, it isn't. It works against you. So cultivate that positive outlook. The ability to manage our attention helps with well-being. What I know is about 50% of you listening are actually here and present in the current day. Most of us are sort of in and out. Considering we spend 100% of our time in the here and now, we only pay attention to it about 50% of the time. We're thinking about the future, what we're going to do. We're thinking about the past. We're off on other tangents. If we can learn to be more mindful and more able to direct our attention than let our attention direct us, we tend to be much more centered, more rested, calmer, and better able to use that to focus and concentrate. A good mindfulness exercise is taking 20 minutes and trying to think about nothing but your breath. Breathe slowly, eyes closed, restful. If your mind starts to wander, bring it back to your breath. If you can, with practice, what you're going to find is you can do that for 20 minutes. Initially, your mind just keeps wandering off, but with training, it gets better. Last one here is, we know generosity and altruistic behavior is associated with a longer and healthier life for the giver. This is what Kiwanis is all about. But right now, I know I have been very aware of the fact that we can't do that. We can't go read to the kids. We can't do the K-Kids. We can't get out and do a lot of the things that had to do with very satisfying ways to give back to the community. So thinking about other ways to give back is a part of that. All right. This next one is more, let's remove a negative, okay? A common source of stress in most people's life is anger. If you can learn to let go of anger, don't escalate it, your life is going to be more satisfying. I like this first one. How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? Very often what starts off as a minor irritation, stone in the shoe, if you escalate it with another person, becomes a relationship ruining event. And that is within our ability to control. I always tell people, remember, if you're bearing a grudge, you're doing all the work, you're carrying it. Thinking that somebody is going to suffer because you're mad at them is like drinking poison and thinking it's going to kill them. Just doesn't work that way. When tempted to fight fire with fire, remember the fire department uses water. So rather than trying to escalate and I know I'm angrier than you are, try to go the other direction and find ways to calm it down. I don't know if you saw the article in the paper, but the amount of domestic violence has stepped up substantially in our area. Not surprising. You bottle people up, they're stuck together, and they have lots of other stressors, no job, no money, uncertain future, all that kind of thing. Managing the anger is a big piece of avoiding that. All right. This growth versus fixed mindset. This grew out of educational research initially. The theory has spread very widely in psychology. A woman named Carol Dweck started doing some work on this. I like Henry Ford's observation about this. If you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. Your belief of the way you frame things has a huge impact on what you're actually able to accomplish. Within the fixed mindset, we see our personalities, our skills and abilities are what we were born with, pretty much. Can't be markedly changed. My profession has been as guilty as any of creating that impression. Oh, here is your IQ score. It's going to stay about the same. Oh, you're an extrovert, and he's an introvert. We've had this impression that that's the way we're wired. The growth mindset says, really through focused effort and learning, we can markedly change our personality, skills, and abilities. So this woman named Carol Dweck started doing some research that everybody said, this isn't going to do anything. It's not going to work at all. And the early studies were they would go in and take a class, new incoming class of 30 kids, and take 10 of them and say to the teacher, these 10 kids on some testing we've done show signs of they're about to have a big developmental spurt over the next year. They're going to just be like little sponges, sucking things up. They're going to be wonderful students and great opportunity to learn. We think they're going to see your IQ growth. And what they found is at the end of the year, that's what happened. The kids' IQs had gone up by like 10 points, which is almost unheard of. And people really didn't believe that it's been repeated multiple times that they're able to shift some of these measures basically by getting the kids to buy into this. So, the advice here is, you don't, when your kid comes home with a good grade, you shouldn't say, oh, you are so smart, Johnny. You're great. You should say, oh, you really studied that hard. You worked at it and look how well you did. Imagine how much better you're going to do with more practice. What we know is that imbues the kid with more of the sense of it's a challenge. It is not, it's a pass fail. You either have it or you don't. And that was one of the things that emerged is kids show more of a growth mindset. They kind of start looking at failure as how you learn. Oh, that wasn't right? Okay, what is the right answer? How do I develop those skills? They have to learn about themselves to build on their own weaknesses and turn them into strengths. And they tend to seek more challenges. That is, they will, if you say, hey, we have another test now. Would you like to take that test to see how you do on this one? Oh, yeah, because I can learn something about what I do and don't know. Fixed kids, failure shows your limitations. So it's painful. You get graded and it's something that you really want to avoid much of the time. You only do it in certain situations where you know you're going to win. And the effort is to kind of reject and ignore weaknesses. How does this apply to us now? This is part of that mindset of, as I walk through, hey, work on this, work on that. It's real easy to say, well, no, I'm always this way. I've always been this way. It can't change. That's a fixed mindset. And it's built into most of us to some extent. Challenging that is a way you can really start to begin and say, let me try some of this stuff. Some of it will help. I'm running a little long, so I'm going to be brief here. Neurology has changed a lot since I started school. In '76, I started my PhD program. And the standard teaching text said, you are born with every brain cell you will ever have. And over the course of your life, you kill off millions and millions of them and whittle them down into a network. But you will never grow another one. We have found that is not true. The brain is continuing to produce new cells throughout the lifespan. When we think about translating learning into what's going on at the brain level, we know if you observe a rat, learning to press a bar when a light comes on to get food, you see the visual cortex light up, and you see the muscles light up, and you see associations slowly get built. As it gets built, those actual neurons in the various parts of the cortex connect to each other more strongly. They physically grow axons and build stronger synapses. So the rule of thumb is systems that fire together, wire together. So if you try something new, initially it's painful, it's hard to do, and gradually it starts becoming grooved and you get better and better at it. That is that building a true structural change in the brain, okay? Using this from a psychology standpoint, we're saying states lead to traits. If you make yourself, if you tend to be a grumpy person and you make yourself be cheerful, it's going to be very hard. It doesn't come naturally to you at all. If you stick with it and work at it and stay with it along, it gradually turns into more of a habit and becomes what we would call a trait. You are basically building it into your brain. So the truth is, your mom was right. If you keep that expression on your face, it might become permanent. Okay. Okay. Last story, and then I'm going to quit here and take any questions. This is, in the mid 1800s, there were two old prospectors who'd run out of money and needed to get together a grub stake. Well, they couldn't think of any way to raise money, but they saw a notice that the government was offering a $25 bounty on Indian scalps. So they decided they'd ride over into Indian country and collect some scalps, enough to get a new grub stake, and they get back to prospecting. So they ride into this valley and pitch their tent, go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and the first guy sticks his head out of the tent. And surrounding them on all the hills are hundreds of Indians, full war paint, all their weapons out, ready to go. He gets back in the tent, he pokes his partner, he says, "Wake up, Charlie, we're going to be rich." So think of this opportunity as we're overwhelmed with an opportunity here to be rich, to change the way we do things and look at things differently.